Greetings from Georgia State University's Center for International Business Education and Research, CIBER, in Atlanta, Georgia. I'm Leanne Liu, Professor and Director of the Institute of International Business at GSU. We come to you on behalf of the CIBER Network's Minority Serving Institution Consortium that are sponsoring and organizing these webinar series. We have had over 80 webinars since April 2020, covering topics of research, teaching, and practice issues with experts in international business. We thank each and every one of you for joining us from different time zones. We are really grateful that you choose to spend an hour with us. As a reminder, these webinars are being recorded. If you want to watch again and forward to others, you can find the recording of this one and previous sessions on the GSU-CIBER website or our YouTube channel. When you exit, please remember to respond to our short survey that give us feedback and new ideas for future webinars. We know that diversity, equity, and inclusion in business practices drives global business trends, new growth sectors with culture-forward strategies, and that DEI insights also shape strategic change initiatives, new products, and new markets for business. Today, we focus on the critical issues of DEI in international business education. So our distinguished speakers are, first, Dr. Astrid Silanski of University Vasa, Finland. Astrid is a researcher and program manager for Bachelor in International Business program at School of Management, University Vasa. She's also the chair of the Academy International Businesses Teaching and Education Shared Interest Group. Astrid holds a PhD in International Management and is an alum of the prestigious Nord IB program. Her research centers around strategic implementation of M&Es, blockchain adoption in international business, and teaching IB. She has published in many distinguished journals in the field, including Journal of Business Research, Critical Perspectives on International Business, Journal of Teaching in International Business, and created various open access teaching resources, including those for teaching diversity management. She has received several international awards for her research and as an educator, such as the X-Culture Global Educator Award, the EFMD Accredited Strategic Business Development Program's Teacher of the Year Award for teaching diversity management. Welcome, Astrid. Our second speaker is Dr. Nuket Vada. She's director of the Brand Whispering Consultancy in the UK, a London-based ed tech company developing innovative online teaching tools and adopting them to international markets. She holds a PhD in international marketing from University of Manchester Institute of Science and Technology. Nuket pursued an academic career while working for the industry since 1985. Her last appointment was as a marketing professor in Istanbul, Turkey. Her research interests are in international marketing, advertising, brand development, with a special focus on case writing and new pedagogical development for business studies. She's the author of 13 books. Welcome, Nuket, too.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here today with you all.
Yeah. So first, let's start by defining diversity, equity, and inclusion especially in the context of international business. Why is it so important to integrate DEI in IB education? And from your own professional personal experience, what are the country cultural differences in DEI definition that will be applied in our teaching? Maybe we start with Austrian first.
Sure. Thank you, Leanne, for a wonderful introduction, and hello to everyone who joined us today. Pleasure being here, pleasure discussing such an important topic. And if we think about how diversity, equity, and inclusion, or DI, have been approached in IB as a discipline, as a research, right? So, of course, we've been always focusing on cross-cultural matters and culture as a major dimension of diversity. If we look at critical studies, they have gone a little bit further. There were some considerations of race and gender, very good works in Critical Perspective Journal on that. But basically, we kind of still focused on very much cross-cultural perspectives. And then, of course, recently, we are opening up and looking at different dimensions and including other elements rather than just these two. So we do have aspects related to religion, sexual orientation, experiences, diverse abilities a little bit, but we're still looking at it a little bit like in a box perspective, and probably this IB economic and very positivist background is influencing. So we are much less focused on intersectionalities, on what diversity would really mean in terms of experiences, in terms of patterns of thinking, evaluation, and sort of many others. So I would say that there are colleagues, especially in Sweden, let's say, who are working on those elements, but we have a scope to broaden our definition and perspective. Nuket, what do you think?
Well, I would actually like to take a little bit of a retrospective view because I believe that, especially even though we are talking a lot about diversity, equity, and inclusivity these days, and they seem to be popping in our daily conversations more and more, including classrooms. I would say that actually these concepts have been embedded in IB for many centuries. It's nothing new as far as I'm concerned. And I would argue that, as we all know, that international business is all about trading and all about borrowing ideas from others, from foreigners. And it's actually basically, for me, it's very, simply put, it's the attractiveness of the unknown. It has been like that for centuries. Take, for example, Silk Route, when it was established, it was actually basically the attractiveness of the unknown lands, unknown materials in those faraway lands that actually brought us Silk Route. Then following again with the timeline of IB, I would say days of colonization. Again, I would say that diversity was embedded in that. Maybe not in so many words as we are using these days, but as a concept, it was there. Because it was, again, just going into faraway land in order to be able to investigate new raw material, new land, and of course, human power. So, I mean, the story goes on like that as far as I'm concerned. And therefore, I would say that diversity, as I said, has been in IB for many years. And if we maybe come closer, actually, for this purpose of this webinar, I was looking at some definitions that were provided by scholars maybe a couple of decades ago. And probably one of the best cited or mostly cited one is Dr. Bodewin's work in order to be able to define international business, international management, international strategy. After I finish talking, I'll just actually copy the references for our participants who might be interested in checking the full references. There again, Bodewin and his colleagues talk about diversity and about going across borders. And it's not only real borders, but also virtual borders. So Again, as I said, I think diversity has been with us for many years, and now it's of course evolving to a different state. A couple of maybe sentence for inclusivity. Again, I would say inclusivity has been with international business for many, many years, many decades. For example, think of how multinationals started developing after Second World War, when big multinational companies started forming their own subsidiaries in different continents. First, they started bringing in their own technical know-how, but then they started realizing that probably to get best results, it's much better to include local management, local manpower, local raw materials, everything which is local. So that brought inclusivity. And with inclusivity, just like as you were mentioning, we started having problems, or not problems, issues regarding cultural sensitivity. Then we see a lot of research being undertaken by scholars, and rightly so, in order to be able to tackle cultural sensitivity. Or then afterwards, it was, for some time, it was called psychic distance. Again, we see a lot of research on psychic distance in order to be able to cope with these problems that were brought up by inclusivity. As a last point, I wouldn't argue that equity was there from the very start. And I would still think that out of diversity, inclusivity, and equity is probably one of the hardest concepts to be able to attain on a larger scale. And I think still, I feel, this is a personal belief, I feel that we've got a far way to go in regard to equity. I think we're much better in regard to diversity and inclusivity, but I don't think that we're in such a good position in regard to equity. I'll stop there, and I'll ask what Leanne has got to say to us.
That's excellent. To start, maybe we can move on to talk about what and how to integrate DEI in IB teaching and learning. I know, Nuket, you have some examples to share, like how DEI can be put into practice in universities and higher education. You're mute.
I know, I'm mute. Yeah, I mean, I think Austin is going to cover how diversity, inclusivity, equity can be taught in the universities. So I thought, in order to be able to broaden the horizon, I thought it might be a good idea if I gave the consultancy perspective in that. I think there is a lot of material, and I'm sure our participants are also aware that there is a lot of material for lecturers to integrate in their lectures when they're talking about diversity, inclusivity. And for example, I'm sure most of our participants are aware that there are specific websites, for example, produced by UNDP or UNESCO on sustainability goals. And there are rich sources. There are very well established research and some cases. But as I said, I think they are mostly known by our participants. So I won't go into that. But maybe for our attendees, participants coming from Europe or from out of Europe, I would especially like to talk about, there are also a lot of examples which are being produced by European Union funds. For example, one such case is being produced for Horizon 2020 programs for EU, talking about future of Europe. Again, those are, I think, rich sources that anybody can tap in. They're in the public domain, and they can be used in the classes. I would like to just mention one example where I was part of it. It was a EU-funded project and was coordinated by British Council some years ago. It was a project on gender equality in education. That is one of the dear subjects to my heart, gender equality, but gender equality in education, I think, is the basis of this all, because if we educate people, then we can actually give them the equal opportunity. I feel this is, again, a personal view. I feel that's a starting point for whichever gender it is. So this project was coordinated, as I say, by British Council, and I was a senior communication consultant in the project. And it was co-funded by EU and the Turkish Republic. And the whole idea was to run this campaign to be able to teach teachers, parents, and students about gender equality and also in education, and to make them aware of it. It was run in 10 different cities in Turkey in 2015, and 40 different schools were involved in it. At the end of the day, including the social media, I think we had something like 23 million people were aware of gender equality in education. And it had far-reaching effects in the country, and and the communication, the launch campaign that we have produced is still being used in some of the training programs for gender equality in education. So I thought I would like to share that with our audience, because it's an animation. You don't even need to understand the language. You don't even have to have the sound or hear the voiceover. It is based on a very simple idea that I think they're called sight words. In order to be able to teach how to read and write, we usually used to see various words, maybe in the primary school or in the nurseries, in order to be able to teach students how to read and write. It was based on that idea, and the stereotyped gender roles that people are accustomed to. Animation starts with two animation characters, one boy, Ali, and one girl, Aisha. And at the beginning, we see the stereotyped gender roles, like Ali is asked to buy a bread, and Aisha is asked to set the table for the family. And these gender roles continue. And at the very end, you see that the slogan is, are you ready to rewrite the future? So I would like to share that. I don't know whether or not we'll be able to hear the voice, but even if we don't, I mean, even if we do, it's in Turkish anyway, so I wouldn't bet on it. I don't know whether or not you were able to see it eventually. Yes, you were. All right. The reason I wanted to share this is because I think there is a lot of similar work which is being done by other international organizations, and the resources are there and they're in public domain. And I think we should also be integrating these in our team. I'll stop there.
Osri.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Nukhet. Very illustrative examples, and indeed visuals are one of the most powerful ways to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion. And if I may a little bit take now, a helicopter view, a bit similar, which is behind my back. And we had a very nice chat with the participants, with Marcelo, and then also we have some questions from Mubarak Ali coming. So I'll probably jump a little bit towards helicopter perspective on education, right? We have questions about, okay, so how do we educate managers and how do we in general approach this topic? So my answer to that would be twofold, right? So one way, if we're talking about education design, the IB programs or any other programs have always a choice to do two things. One thing is to teach diversity, equity, and inclusion as a content, so basically including dedicated courses on the topic. or then include all these elements that fall within DEI into the mainstream courses like strategy, international management, cross-cultural marketing, or whatever courses we may think. So, for example, in our programs, we have both. We have diversity management as a standalone course, where we sort of go through different biases at first. Then we sort of look at the organizational perspective, for example, how to design a diversity, equity, and inclusion policy. Then we look about implementation challenges, what happens when we are implementing these policies, and then we're getting back to, let's say, team perspective or leadership perspective, where students practice further sort of different approaches and perspectives of how to manage diversity dimensions in the context that they think this is very most important for their careers. So this is sort of the content perspective. The other way is to really integrate the DEI topics in the courses, right? So one example that we have done is integrating the DEI in International Strategic Management course. So in addition to teaching the mainstream strategy ideas and talking about how do we design good strategies and how do we implement them, right? We also simulate top management teams who actually run the firm. Now, when they run the simulated firm, in addition to reflecting on basic financial issues, strategic performance and so on and so forth, we do a side-by-side peer evaluations and reflections on how do they utilize each other's diversity in the team. What kind of biases they have to each other, because these are typically international teams and mixed up in terms of genders identifications, in terms of ethnical background. And so also the programs, because we may have these sort of cross-disciplinary courses where we mix up different programs together. So again, functional knowledge, how do they mix up and integrate? And we run this side by side, and students really appreciate it, because sort of then it becomes clear that, okay, it's managerial stuff, and this managerial stuff happens in the daily work of the management teams. And then we're actually able to see how to approach it, what kind of issues, DEI-related issues may pop up when we are working in such teams. So these sort of kind of a big two perspectives on how to deal with that. If we go then further, and of course we'll discuss in a moment in details as we can, what we can do as educators, but as simple as that, when you teach and when you want managers or future managers to think about DEI, not only from the business perspective, it's very much important to show that, social matters have the influence on the MNC performance. And I would like to share one material that just recently got published, and for example, that I'm now extensively using for strategy or international management courses. So the paper that we published with the colleagues that shows that just an ability, managerial or employee ability to comprehend and sort of ascribe idea that in other countries and other units, the employees are different, the managers are different by itself, affect not only my ability as individual to implement multinational strategies, but also the organizational outcomes at the organizational level. So these kind of cases allow us sort of showing that, okay, maybe multinationals today think only about the business and only about the profits when we talk, and a lot of there is this greenwashing or social washing, if you like. But then let's look also at the impact that it has on employees and managers within the organization. And if we're able to combine those two perspectives, the social case and the business case for the diversity, we in fact can get the best outcomes. So that's at least my brief answer to this big question on how do we teach DI to managers. And of course, we continue on the details, I guess.
Yeah. So now let's dig deeper into like how to integrate DI principles into the curriculum development, should it be a separate course called DEI in international business, or be part of each course in international business? And while we're talking about this, maybe you can each provide more details or examples about the specific contents and learning objectives into this implementation in our courses. Maybe we start with you, Austrian, this time.
Okay, sure. So, well, as I said, to my view, I would say both are and should be included in the program. So I wouldn't say that one is better than the other, because the topic is becoming increasingly important. And another issue, what I would say, that probably thinking about the details, we should think about let's put it this way, not all of us have the managerial or program management position where we can choose, right? So what we all can do is we all can always include DEI in our courses as a part of them, right? And if we think about, there are so many small things that we can do that actually have a large impact, right? So let me give you a couple of examples. Just a couple of years ago, we had an open email from a student who finished the programs and who was openly sharing that, well, the student was feeling that the examples that we include or the way we refer to the managers or international careers do not in any way represent the non-binary person, right? And there was sort of feeling a significant underrepresentation that we never refer to managers as they when we talk about one person or in any other way, right? So even thinking about the pronouns that we use in our courses when we are addressing the students matters a lot. The examples when we talk about managers or any other kind of across country operations and people involved, that matters a lot, right? If we have international students, how do we utilize their diversity? Even, for example, when we are forming teams. So such a simple idea is to mix up different gender identifications, different ethnicities, so on and so forth, but we then immediately bump into the problem, how do we approach this or how do we communicate it, right? So one thing is to say, indicate your gender. Another way is indicate your gender's identification, right? And that makes a huge difference. And after I started using these simple, different kind of pronouns, I discovered a lot of gender identifications in my courses. And that was really nice because people could feel included. Another big aspect, I would say, is the basically the assessment. And this is, I would say, something that makes a very large impact on how students feel and how they are able to develop their capabilities further. And we always want to acknowledge diverse abilities of our students. And in that sense, I could give an example for, let's say, how to really focus on elements that help students discover their different abilities and, have the motivation to develop them further. So this is an example of a chapter, and I can share the link, where I sort of provide an example of how important it is when we are evaluating one and the same task to really identify this step-by-step what students have learned, right? So that we're not saying, oh, you got C or you got 5, and that's sort of representation of your knowledge or representation of your abilities, right? Or your skills. I would strongly recommend really having very specific step-by-step points, and preferably even attached to explanation what kind of skill or knowledge it refers to, right? So if we think about teaching diversity management is extremely important if we teach it as a content, because it's very sensitive. It can be really, it can be very big developmental effort for the student. But the same principles apply to any other course. So this is, for example, a screenshot of the rubrics that are used for international management course at the bachelor level. And you can see that the student who got 4, actually in some of the criteria, the student was graded as 1, and 1 is the lowest, 5 is the best evaluation in Finland. So in that sense, the student can say that, okay, I'm really good at creativity and I really managed to write overall good thing, but I'm very bad at decision making, right? And the same thing with the student who got a lower grade. So we can see that I'm really bad at decision making, but I'm really good at other things, right? And when the student walks away from our course with this evaluation, first of all, they recognize that, you know, they and others have diverse abilities that we recognize as educators. And secondly, they have more precise guidance on what to develop and how to approach their education further. So assessment is extremely powerful way to really make our teaching more inclusive and sort of more appreciating diversity that we have. So these are just a few examples. Nuket, maybe you would like to add something to this.
I'll mention a few general points. It was something that we've also actually been discussing. I think we should all be more worried about learning concept or the learning in general rather than teaching, because if at the end of the day, I feel that we should be, all the students that we have today should be good learners, should be lifelong learners, because obviously this is what the future holds. Therefore, I think when we're taking diversity, inclusivity, and all the rest into consideration, and having some practical examples maybe in the classroom, I think our main concern should be, just like you also mentioned, also in the assessment side of it, I think we should be highlighting the learning process all throughout. And we should actually make them feel free to learn and to enjoy learning rather than, in order to be able to pass, get a passing grade. And one other thing, I think instead of including diversity, inclusivity, equity in IB, I think it should be included in management courses in general, rather than, yes, of course, we're talking about IB today, but if we take a maybe broader perspective, I think all of management students, whichever discipline they come from, should benefit from these concepts, and it should be part of their curriculum as well.
Great. So let's talk more about the assessment issue. I know, like the Bloom's taxonomy about change, about learning, there's the awareness, change of value, development of abilities to design strategies and others. What about, and we have a chat question about how can we make a business case that DEI implementation can bring dollar values to the bottom line of the company, and how can we make the case in addition, maybe provide in addition to the qualitative evidence, more quantitative evidence that students and learners can implement in their practice.
Excellent. So maybe I could pick it up because it's sort of on this paper. So in fact, if you read the paper, the paper is qualitative because it's explaining the quantitative results of the multinational. So in fact, there was a clear indication that in some units, quantitatively measured, implementation was failing and the projects were failing, and sort of then we were undertaking the qualitative study in order to explain, and that's where we discovered the importance of the diversity. So that's why I think that it's also a nice example to show that, look, many times we think only about dollars and so on and so forth, but let's delve deeper and see where diversity matters, because when we only think about dollars, we actually are overlooking very in-depth situations and elements that we must reflect on. And in fact, in the corporation in which the case is taking place, written up, I did a consultancy, and we looked at, for example, with the top management team of how to redesign their strategic evaluation measures. And it became very evident that such a diversity elements like the diverse roles or strategic role of MNC units actually matters and is an element of diversity to be considered. So for example, we have 3 or 5 MNC units, and because they are eventually working on global projects, so even if one unit is selling the project, it may land and be contracted or and become a part of the balance sheet of the other unit, right? And what happened is, because the strategic manager evaluation did not include the strategic effort and focused only on the dollars, there was a huge debates and conflicts in the top management team. So when they shifted from purely where the profit lands perspective to actually looking at, you know, what consists, how our work consists of, and how do we measure these efforts that managers make, the dynamic of top management team became much better. And sort of this is again how we can combine the dollar perspective with the non-dollar perspective, right? But if I get back to this ideas of, you know, how do we integrate from the Bloom's taxonomy and so on and so forth, what Leanne you brought up. So it's important to understand that just as in DEI training, DEI education is very can make the same mistakes, right? So we know that most of the DEI trainings fail. Why they fail? Because it's, you know, typically gathering up, saying how much we appreciate everybody, how much we value everybody, but then we discuss, we all want to be good citizens and we want to DEI make profits. But then very soon, you know, we leave the webinar or we leave the workshop and we continue with the same behaviors, right? So the key is when we are talking about DEI integration is that we really have to look for deep behavioral changes. And therefore, it's important to look at different kind of methodologies of how we can teach this, right? So I personally draw on Confucian self-striving philosophy and try to include quite reflexive, collaborative exercises where students can really reflect on their behavioral patterns, thinking patterns, and really think why it would be beneficial for me to change them, right? And how could I change, literally strategize the behavior patterns that would be needed in order to profit in different kind of ways from the DEI integration, right? And there are other methodologies, and in fact, talking about the the upcoming methodologies, I would like to share maybe a piece of information for you to keep an eye on. So I'll share this slide. So 2024, we are going to have an excellent handbook, the first of such kind, about teaching social sustainability. And of course, social sustainability is largely about DEI, human factor engineering, ergonomics, and other issues related to social and socio-economic sustainability. And we managed to gather the contributions from every continent in the world. So we will have a lot of ideas of the content to be taught, of the methods to be taught, and there are fascinating contributions upcoming about how to use digital technology, about how to use creative teaching elements like theater, or storytelling, or kind of a very, very interesting and unique methodologies, as well as cases. So I hope you will find also, because we had the request about the resources, so we try to have some cases that also show, where this kind of a business case is there when we talk about DEI. And in fact, the cases that are included are exclusively real cases. So they're not, they're not fictionary cases. They're all coming from the real situations and the multinational corporations. So this potentially will be another source of material of how could we include DEI in the education.
Great. Nukhet?
Well, and picking on that, I would add to the book that Austin mentioned, the edited book that she has edited with co-editors, which will be published in near future. I've also got one case, and that's it's a case like Austin mentioned, based on primary data. And the case actually, I think I always felt it's quite unique. It talks about democratization of energy in Africa. It's actually teaching Africans how to produce their own electricity. And it is a real case. It was a case based on a startup in the UK. And so I would suggest that everybody to read the entire book, because it's all full of different information and cases. I know my bit, therefore, I'm only able to comment on that. But in general, as Osrin mentioned, it's quite an inclusive book, which should also, it is a handbook, so everyone should be able to get a broader view of the topic.
Excellent. We have one chat question and one chat comment and a question about how leadership development programs, or maybe the strategic elements in in leaders can make a difference. Will that kind of program different from the general DEI education program? Nuket, would you like to start on this question?
Could you repeat the question? I was trying to read from the chat. I wasn't sure about the question. I'm sorry.
I think someone mentioned about leadership development programs, and maybe there's a strategic element in leaders about the DEI development. Let me add another element to this, which would be short-term versus long-term outcomes and initiatives in both education and in business practice.
Right. As far as I know, actually, diversity and inclusivity is being added in all those training programs, also short-term leadership programs, not only in the curriculum that we are used to seeing at universities, but it seems as if it is getting more and more attention lately, and it is being included. Maybe to answer some of the previous question on why there is not qualitative data, I think it is probably too early to produce qualitative data, because we know that usually data comes at a later stage, and as companies experience it, they should be able to quantify the pluses or the minuses of it, if there are, at a later stage.
Yeah. Ausrin?
Yes, I would like to add that basically, first of all, I think it's important in both, because the DEI issues have effects on many managerial and administrative issues, as well as leadership. But of course, when we speak about the leadership development, evaluating, appraising, developing people, able to notice their capabilities, able to notice and utilize their strengths, and so on and so forth. So of course, these are elevated DEI issues and all the different kind of impact of biases. So they all elevate when we talk about leadership. So no doubt in every leadership program, there should be something and hopefully a lot on the DEI. And I was about to share a couple of my brief video lectures, and I'll finish the post and share in the chat, where I do mention that how it is important to understand the deep effect, because so far we are talking, okay, this is gender, this is ethnicity, this is something else. But what DEI actually means and why it should matter to leaders, right? Because if we feel in a specific way, and if we're as leaders not able to address these feelings, we're not able to manage, we're not able to inspire, we're not able to get the best capacity out of our people, right? And again, if we cannot address certain behavioral patterns or direct these behavioral patterns of our teams and our subordinates, right? We are not able to get organization functioning as we like. And this is all because of the diversity that we have in people, right? So for every leader, in addition to understanding just, that there is such a thing as diversity, the psychological perspective, very, very deep psychological perspective of what these dimensions mean in the behavior of the people are extremely important. So I think, of course, for leadership is essential part of the training.
Excellent.
Would like to add one other thing regarding this, especially I feel that especially over the last maybe couple of years, we've actually seen companies integrating diversity into their communication as well, into their marketing programs. I think it's just, and it's not only leadership, but it's being embedded into company strategies from bottom to up. So it is going to, I'm sure that over the next couple of years, we're going to see more and more of it being affected in companies' daily lives. I just wanted to mention the communication programs and the marketing touching upon diversity and inclusivity as well.
Great. So we need to sustain our passion and enthusiasm on the topics and with new teaching methods and technology. I guess my next question would be, how can new technology such as ChatGPT affect our teaching and learning of DEI issues in today's world?
This is an excellent question. I'm happy you asked it, Leanne. The first thing that I asked ChatGPT was how to teach diversity management. And that was really fun. So I was not entirely satisfied with the answer, but that was a pretty good answer, I must admit. Now, the big issue that all these AI-based and open AI particularly tools bring to us is a very big responsibility to teach our students about the biases and what the data, primarily all data that we have and that we feed into the AI tools is biased, right? Mm-hmm. So there are very few examples of data, like, for example, the satellite records of ship movement that are typically used to be processed through the AI and sort of track the modern slavery cases and so on and so forth. But most of the data is socially based and socially biased. And if we're not explaining this to our students, then we are already kind of getting a huge chunk of information and important knowledge from their table, right? So I would say that importance of the AI with the incoming new technologies is only increasing. And another thing is that we really need to think about basically how to deal with these tools, because they may feel like they are able to, to really substitute everything that human is creating. So we really need to uplift this non-number but rather social perspective in teaching and at work, because more and more our workplaces are going to be facilitated with technology, and it's going to be less about handling the numbers, less about handling the data, because the technology is doing that for us, and more about really building the experiences, building the interactions, building the social element. And if we're able to instill this in our students, then they're ready to be in a future workforce and lead the future teams.
In addition to the technology, the challenges with new technology, we know that there are cognitive, emotional challenges for those teachers who are teaching this topic. So what are your advice on handling difficult situations in the classroom when you're teaching the challenging topics? Maybe we start with Nuket.
Is this in regard to ChatGPT?
Well, in addition to technology challenges, maybe
Right.
there are emotional challenges and other challenges, personal and difficult situations.
Right. I would just start with a little bit with Chat GPT. Just like everybody else, I think among our participants, we've all been trying Chat GPT for some time. And like Osrin, I'm also actually quite impressed with the replies that we're getting. I would say that we should actually try to see all the pluses that Chat GPT brings. And I would, for example, I was thinking of using it as in a debate. Have Chat GPT as one of the actors in a class discussion, just to take maybe on to discuss or debate a given topic. And we know that, for example, it's very good in making summaries and making definitions. So I would really take it more like an assistant in the classroom and deal with it. But on the downside of it, and maybe to answer your question more directly, we know that it's not able to think and it's not able to analyze, it's not able to connect points. So I think that's where the human element comes in. Because I think the human element and the use of common sense. I always say this also to students, trainees. Common sense is not so common actually, and I think we should be trying to, again, in the learning environments that we are creating in today's world, we should be telling students actually to make more of their common sense by questioning it, by questioning things that they see, like, by the information that is being produced by AI in today's world. We should actually ask them to take more of a critical view in whatever they see, read, whatever that they've been exposed to. And also, I think we're also seeing those signs as well. I'm sure you've also come across, especially over the last maybe 2 years or so, we see more and more of companies talking about being kind to each other in the management environments. I think, again, these are the human elements that are being talked about more, because with the use of AI, I think we came more aware of it, that we are humans and we've got feelings, and it's actually much better, it's best practice if we are able to put facts and figures together with the feelings, because at the end of the day, we are not robots. And I think that's our upper hand, and we should comprehend that and also, bring that view in the classrooms. While teaching, again, of course, AI is good and we should be making best use of it. Technology is good, we should be making best use of it. But while doing that, I think we should also tell our students that they've got some human characteristics that no robot can replace, and they should be making the best use of it. Just one last point, I was reading about, again, Chat GPT, and one of the things that they say that Chat GPT or AI is not good at is storytelling. Again, storytelling goes back centuries, from Aesop's fables all the way through, and each and every country have got their own fables, stories, wise men talking about life. I think that's a good take. There is no robot who would be able to replace it, who would replace this wisdom. And therefore, the article was mentioning that storytelling will be more of a seeked trait in the years to come. I think we should also be keeping that in mind, because those storytelling is basically touching somebody or touching other people's emotions. I think we should never ever forget about that.
Leanne, if I could make a quick comment about your question about the challenges. Well, it's a disclaimer to everyone. DEI teaching is never easy. Believe me, every time I finish the DEI course, I was like, it's done. For God's sake, it's over, right? Students will object to you. Whenever you start discussing this topic, you will never manage to make representation for everybody. Because it's a critical discussion, you will involve in a lot of difficult topics, and not to all the topics you will have answers, and not to all the topics the answers or the comments are possible. You'll engage in a lot of evaluation of values and what is good and is bad, and then all the ethics knowledge comes in, right? People will not like that you are saying that their behavioral patterns may not be exactly the way there should be. So in any case, just be ready for objections. Be ready for objections that, you know, these are not numbers, but be ready also for objections like why on earth I have to change, and why we have to discuss this, and why we have to go through this peer evaluation, why do we have this crazy assignment where we're now playing things around, right? So DEI is not easy, but the good news that the social environment is really motivating. And if 5 years ago or 6 years ago, when I started teaching that, students really had to be motivated, and they would enter the course or they enter any kind of a discussion that's like, oh, this is nonsense. So now it's vice versa. They come and ask questions. And all I need to do is actually to say, okay, or find innovative materials or new kind of approaches of dealing with this topic, right? But overall, there is a great interest in that from different kind of perspectives. So I think we should be positive despite the challenges that we may face.
Great. Well, we only have 2.5 minutes left. I guess I want both of your closing thoughts about DEI education. Will DEI just become a topic of a certain time? Will it become a topic of the past and people move on to new other topics? Or are you optimistic that this is an important topic that will sustain our enthusiasm or interest in the students' interest in the future of international business education? Maybe Nuket, you can start.
Let me go first. I'm an optimist like Osrin. I believe that actually these concepts are here to stay. And as I've said, they've been here for many centuries, but it's just that they have evolved. And I feel that they will continue evolving. Personally, I believe those are important concepts and we should be integrating them in our daily lives. But with a one word of caution, I must add, just like in anything else, I think there's a pendulum in every concept, in globalization, in IB, in every sort of, in life actually. Usually we swing from one end to the other. It has been like that for centuries. And I sometimes feel, listening to experts on DI, that sometimes the pendulum is swinging to the other side. I think once it comes in some sort of a balance, it reaches an equilibrium. I think we will all be benefiting it from as a society, as all human beings. But I just wish that, you know, that equilibrium is reached within a short period of time.
Wonderful, really nice, nice summary, Nuket. Only one thing that I would add to my optimism, right? Whichever we're going to call it, like Nuket said, there is one underlying learning outcome that sort of summarizes DEI issues, is respect to others, right? So whichever way we call it, respect to others, or the need to respect others without really making harm or without making any negative impact, and being able to live with different opinions, different point of views, without going to war, without bombing each other, without doing anything to each other, right, will always remain, be it international business or any other discipline, right? So I would say whichever we're going to call it or have called it, teaching respect in different contexts, financial outcomes, social outcomes will always remain. So I remain optimistic in that sense.
Thank you, Osrin and Nuket, for sharing such outstanding insights and resources from different but very complementary perspectives. We've learned a lot. And thank you everyone for joining us from all over the world. Please respond to our short survey as we exit, and that will give us feedback and ideas for future webinar topics. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.